G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and a happy Monday. I hope that the start of your week has been as good as at least it can be. Now today, as always, we do have a lot to go over. Of course, I'm going to look at the maps. We're going to look at the maps everywhere, but we're going to focus down in Vuhledar and talk about the situation that's occurring there, as well as some footage. We'll talk about the Ukrainian drones overnight that were reported to strike airfields, as well as ammo depots as well, and the satellite imagery that's come out from this. I've shared with you over the past couple of weeks, but then a few months ago, these fiber optic tow drones that the Russians are using, and we get a far better look at them being used today, and I will show you that. And of course, just looking at the maps overall, and a flanker being done by the Ukrainians, and we'll look over some US, Ukraine, what may be done for victory, what may be done for peace, and how Deep State has also spoken about this as well. So, as always, we do have a lot to go over. Now, I got sent over by a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, I guess, a very interesting question. And I was going to answer it in this video today, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a separate video completely, because I started typing this and I got 3 or 4 pages into typing and thought, let's just do it in a separate video. That video will be up in about 12 to 14 hours since you're seeing this. But I'll give you the question in case you want to watch it or save your time. You've often made the point that you think the eventual ceasefire peace treaty borders will be close to the current front line. I don't understand why. I mean, it's clear that Ukraine currently has no means to move it significantly, but the Russians have been knocking out fortified place after fortified place. Avdiivka, Mariinka, Krasnohivka, New York, Vuhledar soon, probably Toretsk, possibly Chasiv Yar, and each time they find the fortifications behind these are rather scarce, so they can move a bit more easily. And west of Pokrovsk, there's really not much to fortify, and mostly small villages except for Pavlograd. Why do you see the Russians being stopped near the current lines? Maybe you could detail your thoughts in a video. And with this, he sent the population density of Ukraine and focusing in and around this Donbass area and potential fortifications here. So look, I'm going to answer that in a video. It's probably going to be long. I didn't want to make this one a bloody hour long, but it's got a lot to do with industry, politics, determination, goals, and allies as well. So we'll speak at length about this. But while I was doing that research and sort of mental breakdown, putting pen to paper about what I thought, I had a very interesting thing that popped up as something that I haven't considered, but I think that we should coming into the future. Now, one thing which I've spoken about a lot is that China has no formal military alliances. But what we do know is there is definitely, well described by Russia and China, a no limits friendship. Anyway, let's talk about a couple of things. In a protracted war, Russia and China can solve a lot of issues for each other where they would be lacking in this. For Russia, it's mainly just industrial might and financing. For China, the main thing would be access to ports so they can't get naval blockaded in the South and East China Sea, as well as grain. So both together can be fairly self-sufficient. What we have seen so far in this war is realistically very limited support from China to Russia in terms at least of hardware. I can't speak on ISW and I won't speak, I guess, politically overall, but just hardware. So what we have seen is, yes, some vehicles, maybe some bikes, but that's fairly small fish considering. Now, what you may have seen recently is China has had a very, very embarrassing moment this week, or last week now, when a nuclear submarine has sunk in the port. Now, it is well documented that one of the main technological expertise and experience that China is after from Russia, or potentially at least reported is after, is expertise in Russia's nuclear submarines and their anti-submarine warfare technology. And it's, like I said, well documented from the Chinese PLAN, their navy, about this. Now, what I have been wondering in this is I do wonder if the Kremlin could see this as some level of an opportunity to make maybe an offer there of, hey, we'll help you out with this, maybe the nuclear propulsion of this, which we do know in nuclear propulsion, not only militarily, but say for icebreakers, Russia is, regardless of what you think of Russia, they are one of the world leaders in naval nuclear propulsion. You can see that with icebreakers and with other ships as well. Could we have, I guess, a share here that we help you out with this? Maybe then if you help us more, maybe with physical equipment, maybe political support, or even a little bit of coercion in the future if there is some negotiation that China, Ukraine, the US are maybe involved in. I just thought that was interesting. You know, sometimes I get a little bit conspiratorial, but Russia is definitely looking to China and trying to make better and better friends there. So, and China is trying to have a more and more powerful navy. Industrial-wise, they outstrip everyone else just in building it, but there are questions around some of the build quality and technology of those systems as well. Again, just something I then thought about. Now, let's actually get stuck into the video. You can listen to all of that in bloody half a day if you would like. So, the other day, I reported that there has been at least rumors. I saw people talking about there was a Russian reconnaissance guy on a bike, at least one, make it into Selydove. And I reported this and said, look, be aware of it, but unless I see any footage, I'm probably not going to bloody believe it. Now, today, you guys actually sent me over a video of exactly this. So look, I'll lay out where we're talking about. Here is Ukraine, the center, capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. And where we're coming is down Pokrovsk front, one of the main areas in here, Selydove. City of, tens of thousands of people before the war, and a major hub in here, of course, before then Pokrovsk. But by this map, no grey zone, and Russia really did struggle to achieve a break-in on the east. But I'll show you the Syriac map later on that shows a far more difference on the south. But this footage was then shared with myself. So we see then a MiG-17 in a park here and that central part of this. And then we see, buzzing around this corner, this bloke appearing to be on sort of like an e-bike or motorcycle. Now, he's being chased by a drone here, and I can't show you the remainder of the footage. He's then targeted by drones. Now, I'm not completely sure if he was alone or part of a reconnaissance DRG, sabotage reconnaissance element. But the interesting part here is, of course, the geolocation. So look, I'll show you where this is. So we have Selydove here. We zoom in and we actually can find this memorial right here. This is that MiG-17, and he's traveling around this corner here and then down this road heading south, I presume, out of Selydove. But what that does say is he was able to bypass whatever ways defensive works, fortifications, to actually get into here. I don't know exactly how this happened, going through fields, going down roads, whatever, but according to that footage, definitely actually made it into here before being fatally targeted by those drones. Seems a lot like a one-way bloody mission, but something to be aware of. Another thing to be aware of is we spoke last week that we had heard in the months previous that there was an upgraded extended range improvement to Russia's FAB glide bombs that have been causing a lot of chaos on the front lines. Now, last week, what we saw was that for the first time, Zaporizhia up here was then hit by one of these FABs. And I shared with you also some information of a friend of mine who went to check out the explosion itself. Now, we saw that the first time, then we saw it again. Now, today, we can still look on the alerts list that there is repeated launches of guided aerial bomb by tactical aviation in Kharkiv and Zap regions. And from reporting I've seen, it was a minimum of 13 glide bombs went into Zap just overnight. So it's worth knowing that too, in case we do see further actions in and around the south or further bombing of Zap as well, now with those extended range munitions. So before we get into the maps, I want to talk about these Ukrainian drones that went back into Russia overnight. We know Ukraine has been having a lot of success with these, but today there are some claims and there is some satellite imagery and some other things that may not be really lining up that much. So we have the Milerevo airfield, which we don't know too well, and we also have the Kutlaban ammo depot also. So the first I saw of this was this footage being shared by then a lot of pages. The Kutlaban image storage has left the chat and this video being put up. Now, what this video actually is though, is this is a mirrored video from Dubai more than now 3 years ago. So it's a mirrored image there. It's not then the footage. People are getting called out for this. A lot of people, I'm just using it for an example. But no, it's absolutely to show that that's what that blast was. Because let's have a look further at this. Ukraine's general staff put up this image of this black smoke and something burning here. The military arsenal of the Russian occupiers, the Kutlaban, was struck as well. The writing along with this, that damage was inflicted on the arsenal, storage and modernisation of missiles and artillery systems of the Russian occupiers near the village of Kutlaban in Volgograd region. According to available information, the eve of the attack, the echelon of Iranian missiles arrived at the arsenal. The military object has dense cover by means of electronic warfare and anti-aircraft defence. However, our unit successfully completed the combat mission. There is a fire and detonation of ammunition on the territory of the arsenal. The operation was carried out by unmanned drones in cooperation with the Special Operations of Ukraine and their main intelligence directorate here. So we hear Iranian drones. There was blasts there also. Now, I think into the future, Iran, maybe from this point on, is not going to have as many available missiles or drones, maybe for Russia with everything happening here. But we do know, again, I spoke about China. There's Iran. They want some of that technology, and there has been definitely some level of share, one way from Russia to Iran and the other way from Iran to Russia as well. These is why the conflicts we're seeing at the moment, they're not completely mutually exclusive. There is overlap here. But then we look at the satellite imagery of Kotlaban. What we can see is there's definitely been maybe debris or something impact around here. Maybe it was hit by EW, and there has been then a large grass fire. But anything as far as impacts or further explosions in Kotlaban, no, not on this area here. That has been shared by now many, many pages. So again, it does bring in the idea of what exactly actually then occurred here. Now, the one we don't have satellite images on yet, and we probably will by tomorrow, is the Milanovo airfield. Now, this is the airfield right here. This is the firm's data that shows where fires were present. What some people have said is there were actually some fires in these areas the day previously that may have picked this up also, but we do know there was an amount of drones fired upon here. What we don't know is what has been hit. But we have a quick look at where I've put in some of these. So this is the airfield, and I've basically done a circle of where these fires are and what could be there. And there doesn't look like there would be too much. Maybe Russia for once actually turned on their fucking air defense and it worked, or these were hit by EW, or the drones potentially have hit AD systems that sit outside of the base. And this is the area of this top left firm's data too. Again, we don't know what is actually being hit here, if anything, or it has been actually successfully then intercepted. So let's talk about Vuhledar. Now, this is one of these areas we're not seeing. Well, this map has not updated today. Let me just quickly hit upload. No, has not updated today by Deep State, but we do have some information regarding Vuhledar itself, and I'll specifically talk on how I see the situation. Now, today, we are seeing that Russia is launching very, very large barrages of TOS-1 Alpha, which is thermobarics, onto Vuhledar. Now, this is looking from south to north. One interesting piece is this one that lands then short. Unsure exactly what has been targeted there, potentially maybe a fortification just outside of the city itself. But this is a very large barrage. Typically, we don't see a TOS firing this many because Russia does have reportedly a large shortage of TOS rockets as well. That TOS system having a very short range, it is highly susceptible to drones too, but absolutely raining havoc that they cause on Vuhledar. This is what then the Russian page that shared this has said, that while our assault units are consolidating on the eastern outskirts of Vuhledar, the way for them is being cleared not only by barrel artillery and aviation, but also multiple launch rocket systems such as these, capable of burning out and destroying the fortified areas. The battle for Vuhledar will not be an easy walk for our troops. The advance is complicated by the geographical features and terrain of the front. Despite this difficulty, the offensive is proceeding rapidly. We haven't seen any changes on the maps for here in a couple of days, but I think that may be for a reason also. Now, this will give you a better idea. This is what Deep State has said about Vuhledar. Now, it says that the Russians are erasing the city with constant shelling. The road to Boyanevka is under fire control. So we need to have a look at this too. that this is the road that they speak of from here down to Vuhledar, as well out onto other areas that can then supply in or leave Vuhledar as well, that this road is now under fire control here. And we've seen as well out to Selydove, where FABs have been landing as well. My take on Vuhledar is that there are an amount of soldiers in here. Now, I have heard numbers between 1,000 and 2,000. I don't know, but it will have to be considerable, considering that it hasn't fallen much faster. So it has to be a considerable amount in there. A figure, I don't know. But I also think that it is actually probably to the point where Ukraine can't withdraw from Vuhledar. You've got a very small pocket here that you're having to come out across open fields. And we know the amount of artillery, TOS, FABs working here. There may not be actually a way to withdraw, so you have to stay and fight. And this is one of the reasons why Russia may be dropping those leaflets, is that, of course, if you're the commander, you'd rather demoralize and potentially have your enemy surrender rather than actually have to launch assaults into that and have large losses of your own. And I think Russia may have actually slowed infantry assaults in here, try and just hit it with these FABs, glides and barrel artillery as well. So soften it up, potentially, for want of a better term, starve them out in here, reduce the losses that you're going to take moving further into here. Potentially, could we see some level of like rescue mission by a unit like in Avdiivka to come in and try and stabilize this front and actually pull these guys out? Because at this point, my looking in this may be that there's no way in or out of here currently. We don't know exactly how many troops and or assets are in Vuhledar itself, but it could also be very large. So let's actually have a look then straight up in the north, back actually inside of Russia. Now, we haven't seen too much changes on this for a while. Russia had its counteroffensive. Ukraine has had pushes in areas, but I want to look at a bit of footage today. We do know Ukraine opened up this second area around Vasiole here. This map hasn't really been tracking it, but I'll show you some other bits and pieces here. So again, this footage will be on the Telegram, but what we can see is a packet of, it was 5 or 6 Ukrainian vehicles here, I believe 6, moving down this road. Now, I believe that at least 2, potentially 3, were taken out. But we can see where they were moving is important, having much further of a push north than we thought, outflanking somewhat of Vasiole. So we can see right up where my cursor is here, where I've dropped this pin, is where this was coming as a bit of a flanker around Vasiole itself. And then Rybar, Russian sources map, does confirm this. Of course, it's saying that they then struck these vehicles, but it does confirm that there was that level of element push up, just hook around, flanking maneuver there. So again, we'll see and see what or where these maps change. And Syriac maps does show that there was some level of success around Vasiole here today and Ubakovka. Now, Ubakovka sits just below Vasiole. Don't worry too much about it. It's not just shown on that map. Ukrainian army took control over the locality of Ubakovka and part of Vasiole, so definitely a push forward there. Suja district, Russian army took control over a series of positions south of Plekovo. So this is well out to then the east of where we are looking currently. So we come out and we can then see Plekovo here, and Shurek has been reporting for a couple of weeks now that Borky is under Russian control. Again, hard to know exactly in there, but is interesting to see those movements there, but it did look, at least by the footage, of 2 to 3 getting taken out there. Maybe an unsuccessful assault, but where it was ground made, again, we are unsure. So let's have a look at some other areas of the maps while we are here. Now, while we're up in the north, let's have a look at Makivka. Now, we have seen this map update this, but we do know it's looking different for different maps. So this is the red dot of Makivka here shown, and far greater on the southern side of this than the deep state map is showing. You can see the best way is probably the kinks in this road and a lot of ground made up in here. I've seen other maps showing and saying that between Makivka and Nevsky has actually been closed up. Again, just what I've been seeing, not shown on the maps that we typically use, or at least comparison of these maps. So let's just move then down to the south further, and we come, of course, to the Pokrovsk front. Now, this is where we need to look at that train line, which we have spoken about, is important, and we're back in Selydove. Of course, where my cursor is, where we saw that bloody crusty demon on the motorcycle in here, and we can see further advancement out to the south near Tuskerne as well by the Russian forces by the Syriac map, and movement along this railway, which we do know is very important for the flank of Selydove. So again, just keep in mind that these updates is what we are seeing. Now, I have spoken about tow drones a lot and the pros and cons of them. Yes, there are definitely cons, but there are pros. Is it going to replace radio-controlled drones? No. Is it another tool in the tool belt in a electronic warfare degraded environment? Absolutely. Not only in an EW environment, but also an environment in heavy trees, under buildings, within buildings, or underground in mines as well. And I think we'll see more and more of this being used. Now, we only had the one that was recovered from Ukrainian troops, but now we get footage exactly to actually have a look at this. And we can tell straight off the bat that this is then the same one. You can see the warhead on the drone here, as well as then what we believe, or at least I believe, is the fiber optic cable sitting in this barrel and feeding out the back here. Some say up to then 6 kilometers away, as well as then a DJI drone here also. And we get a better idea, there goes T90, of some other systems. Now, this system right here, what they're saying this is, I believe, is an EFIR ability to hack into Ukrainian drone signals. So you hit that analog or digital signal being sent to the drone, and you can see what the drone is seeing. You can't control it, but you can see it, and it's a little bit like screen cheating on PS2 if you've ever done that playing bloody Call of Duty. You can see it and you get an idea of where it is and maybe dodge that. But again, I already have put this footage on the channel, but you can see the quality of image in these FPV wire-guided drones rather than your typical drone just in general, but especially in an environment that may be degraded. And I wonder when we will see something like that pop up on the Ukrainian side. This was the caption that went along with it. Special Force repelled attack in Glashkovo using the new air control system, combat footage from Kursk region. So again, we've only seen these used in Kursk. I've given you the reasons of why that may be. This system is for intercepting analog video from flying kamikaze. This helps react to a threat in time. So you might actually see yourself in the bloody video. It provides interception of analog video from the FPV, distinguish where the drone is, where the fire may be, and the drone's operating point if one of these drones returns back to its home area as well. So that's just something to be aware of. Those drones, we've talked about it, and now we are seeing it back in use more and more. Now, let's look over some bits and pieces here. We'll look at what Deep State has said and what one of my another friend has said about Kamala 2. So let's have a look at this. I'd like to bring your attention to something that seems to have gone largely unnoticed. In her remarks before the meeting with Zelensky, Harris said something very interesting. She mentioned that Russia was attacking the principle of sovereignty, and she blamed Trump for wanting to force Ukraine to give up territory. However, she did not commit to helping Ukraine gain all of it or state such a goal in any clear way. However, she did say that she wants an end based on the will of the people of Ukraine and the UN Charter. Now, before we go into this, let's have a look at what she had actually said in here. She talks about the Swiss Peace Conference and an end based on the will of the people of Ukraine and the UN Charter. Nothing about the end of this war can be decided without Ukraine. So Ukraine will be involved in that decision. I share with you, Mr. President, there are some in my country, referring to Trump, who would instead force Ukraine to give up large parts of its sovereign territory, who would demand that Ukraine accept neutrality and would require Ukraine to forego security relationships with other countries. Let's be clear. They are not proposals for peace. Instead, they are proposals for surrender, which is dangerous and unacceptable. To work with you and ensure Ukraine prevails in this conflict, remains free, democratic and independent nation. But like this guy says here, it doesn't exactly say a return of those territories. It talks about sovereignty, it talks about democracy. It doesn't exactly say these territories. This is what he's referring to. Now, let's continue. This is very interesting because it means two important things. The will of the people of Ukraine and the UN Charter, Article 1, Section 2 of this charter states, the purpose of the United Nations are to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and to take other appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. Self-determination, she mentioned the will of the people of Ukraine directly, and the charter may have been an allusion to this principle of self-determination. I think she may be signaling that she wants a referendum of some kind, or perhaps several. Perhaps she's thinking about a national referendum in Ukraine to decide on some sort of peace treaty, or maybe one referendum per contested oblast, though that would surprise me a lot more. As we know, this is what other nations have somewhat talked about, is then let's stop the fighting of the war and then worry about the territory afterwards. This can be done under the UN Charter under self-determination to a degree. We have broken that down, and it's not super clear about self-determination because states say it's self-determination but still within the borders. Other people interpret it differently. Of course, I think Russia interprets that differently of how maybe Ukraine see it, but this could upend some things as well, that if this did happen and then there was a fair vote that Western states saw as being legitimate, what happens if Crimea votes against this, maybe in favour of Russia? How does that then change things for territory? So that's interesting, something to go over as well. Deep State has done an interesting post somewhat about this too, referring to NOAA intelligence channel, commenting on the rumours about a truce, and that some people are spreading an active idea. What would happen? An armistice was signed at the beginning of the war on terms of the Russians. So what would have happened back then if things happened? And he does talk about in the first 6 months, this was a great opportunity to beat the Russians with a stick. Their military was not yet inflated. There were not enough fortifications. Clear algorithms and strategies have not been developed. The propaganda machine was not spun up to support the war and encourage mobilization. So this was when, and I've said this too, the Russians were in the worst area in the first 6 months. That was really the time, to use words they say, to beat them with a stick. A lot of this has been fixed since then. And if there was more support at that time, could have had a very, very different outcome. Of course, on TV, they'll say there will be a breakthrough. But the breakthrough never happened, because now it is not only about what was given, but also about how they were taught. Currently, the greatest emphasis should be placed on the training of fighters, and weapons are only an auxiliary tool. This is something we've spoken about at length, that yes, Western support for weapons and training can take place, but at the end of the day, there still needs to be mobilised or voluntary manpower within Ukraine to then man those tools. In the end, we cannot disagree with the opinion. Where this war leads, we as ordinary soldiers, due to a narrowed within sector of trench zone of responsibility, cannot say much. Simply, sooner or later, this war will lead to the fact that one of the nations will be ready to sign anything to stop it. So eventually, at some point, either Russia or Ukraine will be in such a position, if they're given any sort of deal to get out of it, then they will sign it. That is what Deep State is saying. Anyway, legends, that other video will go up tomorrow morning, my time. But have a great day, and I'll speak to you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.